The night I watched my parents get handcuffed in their own living room, I held my daughter's hand and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The look on my father's face when the detective read him his rights, when he realized his empire of cruelty was crumbling, that was the moment I knew I had won. But getting to that moment, that victory, cost me everything I thought I was. If you're here because you've ever felt powerless in your own family, because someone took your child and made you feel like you didn't deserve to be called mother, then stay with me. This story isn't easy, but it's real. And before I take you back to where it all began, if you believe that every mother deserves to fight for her child, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who refuse to stay broken. And comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to choose between family and your own sanity? Because I did. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Let me take you back to 2 weeks before that night. To where my nightmare was living and breathing. I was washing dishes at Jerry's Diner on 5th Street. My hands raw from the industrial soap. My uniform stained with grease from the kitchen. The clock on the wall said 11:47 p.m. I had been on my feet for 9 hours straight, and all I could think about was Lily, my daughter. My 5-year-old baby girl, who I hadn't seen in 14 days because my parents, Robert and Patricia Vance, had decided I wasn't worthy of being her mother. The laughter from the last table of customers felt like knives scraping against my skull. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed like that. Free and unburdened. My phone was in my apron pocket, and every few minutes I would check it, hoping for a message, a photo, anything that would tell me my daughter remembered. I existed. Then it vibrated. My heart jumped. I pulled it out with wet hands, leaving soap bubbles on the screen. Unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but something made me tap the message. Your daughter is crying for you right now. You deserve this. The plate I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered in the sink. Mike, the night manager, called out from the front, asking if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay in 5 years. Since the night Lily's father walked out and I had nowhere to go but back to my parents' house, back to the place where I learned that love was conditional and respect was something you had to earn by being perfect. I tore off my apron, told Mike I had an emergency, and ran out into the November cold without even grabbing my jacket. The bus ride to my parents' house in Riverside Heights took 23 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind was racing. Was Lily hurt? Was she sick? Or was this message just another way for my mother to torture me? To remind me that I was the failure, the disappointment, the daughter who couldn't do anything right. When I got to the house, the lights were on downstairs. I could see movement through the curtains. I used my old key, the one I wasn't supposed to have anymore, and pushed open the door. The sound of laughter hit me first. My mother's cold, sharp laugh, and my father's deep, mocking one. Then I heard it, Lily's voice, small and confused, asking why Mommy couldn't come see her. I walked through the foyer, my shoes squeaking on the polished hardwood floor. My mother obsessed over. The living room opened up before me, and there she was. Lily, sitting on the Persian rug with a chess set in front of her, the one my father used to play with my sister Mia before she moved to California and cut off all contact with the family. Lily's dark curls were pulled back in a ponytail, and she was wearing a dress I didn't recognize. A dress my mother had bought for her. Probably another way to erase me. Mommy, Lily's eyes went wide, and in that moment, I saw everything. Joy, confusion, fear. She started to get up, her small hands pushing against the floor. I opened my arms, tears already streaming down my face because this was it. This was all I wanted. Just to hold my daughter again. I didn't see my father move. 1 second, I was standing there, arms outstretched. And the next second, there was an explosion of pain in my ribs. His boot connected with my side so hard, I heard something crack. I went down, my head hitting the edge of the coffee table on the way. The taste of blood filled my mouth. Don't you dare touch her, you worthless piece of trash. My father stood over me, his face twisted with disgust. He was a big man, 6'2", with hands that had built a successful construction business and destroyed his daughter's sense of self-worth in equal measure. Behind him, my mother emerged from the kitchen. wiping her hands on a dish towel as if she had just finished cleaning up after dinner. "You're filthy," Patricia Vance said, looking at my stained uniform with those ice-blue eyes that never held warmth. "Only judgment. You'll contaminate the child. Get out." "Grandpa." "Don't hurt Mommy," Lily screamed. She was crying now, standing frozen by the chess set, too terrified to move. My father turned to her and laughed. Actually laughed. "Your mommy is just learning a lesson. Sweetheart, pain teaches faster than words. Doesn't it?" "Ellie." I tried to breathe, but my ribs screamed in protest. I pressed my hand against the carpet, tried to push myself up. My mother's shoe appeared in my line of vision. One of those expensive flats she bought at Nordstrom. "You're making a scene," she said quietly. "Haven't you embarrassed us enough? First, you get pregnant by that deadbeat. Then you can't even hold down a proper job. And now you show up here looking like something we'd scrape off our shoes. What did we do to deserve a daughter like you?" I lay there on their perfect floor, in their perfect house, and something inside me broke open. Not in the way things break when they're destroyed. In the way things break when they've been holding too much pressure for too long. I looked up at my father, at the man who had called me worthless more times than he'd ever said he loved me. And I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized she had nothing left to lose. "You're going to pay for this," I said, my voice steady despite the blood in my mouth. "Both of you." My father's eyes narrowed. For just a second, I saw something flicker there. Uncertainty. Fear. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual arrogance. "Get this trash out of my house," he told my mother. "And if she comes back, I'm calling the police." They didn't help me up. I crawled to my knees, then stood on my own, one hand pressed against my ribs. Lily was sobbing now, reaching for me. I wanted to grab her, to run out of that house with her in my arms. But I knew that would only make things worse. My mother would call the cops. My father would press charges, and I would lose Lily forever. So I walked to the door, but before I left, I turned back and looked at my daughter. "Mommy loves you," I said. "Don't ever forget that." That night, I lay in my studio apartment in the worst part of town, the place I could barely afford on my wages from the diner, and I stared at the ceiling. Every breath hurt. My head was pounding from where I'd hit the table, but worse than the physical pain was the sound of Lily's crying echoing in my ears. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft knock on my door. I dragged myself up, thinking maybe it was my landlord coming to complain about noise. Even though I'd been silent all night, I opened the door a crack. It was Lily. My mother stood behind her, holding her by the shoulder with a grip that was too tight. Lily's face was swollen from crying, and she was in her pajamas. "The brat wouldn't stop crying for you," my mother said, her voice dripping with disgust. "She's keeping us awake. But don't think this means anything. She'll learn soon enough that you're not worth her tears." My mother pushed Lily toward me and walked away without another word. I pulled my daughter inside, locked the door, and held her while she cried herself to sleep on my mattress on the floor. I stayed awake all night, watching her breathe, and making a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to fight. The next morning, after I walked Lily back to my parents' house because I legally had no choice, I went to see Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. She lived in a small house on Maple Street, and she had been a social worker for 30 years before retiring. When I was 15 and my father had broken my wrist during one of his lessons, Mrs. Hayes had been the one who came to our school to investigate. Nothing came of it because my parents were respected in the community, and I had been too scared to tell the truth. But Mrs. Hayes had given me her number and told me to call if I ever needed help. I hadn't called in 10 years. But I called now. Mrs. Hayes was 72 years old. With silver hair she wore in a bun and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. She opened her door, took one look at my face, and immediately ushered me inside. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. I told her about the past 5 years, living under my parents' roof because I had nowhere else to go. I told her about how they slowly took over raising Lily, how they undermined me at every turn, telling her I was irresponsible, broken, worthless. I told her about how they started keeping Lily from me, claiming I was a bad influence. And I told her about last night, about my father's boot in my ribs, about the message someone had sent me. Mrs. Hayes listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward and took my hands in hers. Ellie, what I'm going to tell you is going to be hard, but you need to document everything, every bruise, every cruel word, every time they keep Lily from you. Record conversations if you can. Take photographs. Build a case. Because when you decide to fight, and you will fight, you need to have evidence that will stand up in court. They'll destroy me, I whispered. They have money, connections, lovers. I have nothing. You have the truth. Mrs. Hayes said firmly. And you have something they'll never have. You have love for your daughter that isn't about control. That's more powerful than you think. She gave me the number of a lawyer named David Miller who did pro bono work for domestic violence cases. She also gave me a small digital recorder, the kind that could fit in my pocket. Use this, she said. And Ellie, don't confront them with anger. Let them show who they really are. People like your parents can't help themselves. They'll reveal their true nature if you give them enough rope. For the next 3 weeks, I became a spy in my own family's war against me. Every time I was allowed to see Lily, which was maybe 3 times a week for an hour at a time. I had that recorder running in my pocket. I documented everything with my phone camera. The bruises on my arms from where my mother grabbed me too hard. The scrape on my cheek from when my father shoved me into a wall. And the words. Oh God. The words. You're just like the trash you attract. Ellie. No wonder that man left you. Why are you even here? Lily doesn't need a mother who can barely feed herself. You're mentally unstable. We're doing that child a favor by keeping her away from you. But the worst recordings were the ones involving Lily. My parents had started a campaign to turn my daughter against me, and I had to stand there and record it happening. One afternoon, I arrived for my scheduled visit to find Lily sitting at the kitchen table, coloring. My father was reading the newspaper, and my mother was preparing dinner. It looked so normal, so domestic. Except it wasn't. Lily, honey, can you tell your mother what you told us this morning? My father said, not even looking up from his paper. Lily's small hand stopped coloring. She looked at me with those big brown eyes, and I saw confusion there. She was 5 years old. She shouldn't have to navigate these adult manipulations. Grandma said you don't really want me, Lily said quietly. She said you left me because you didn't love me enough. The recorder in my pocket captured the sound of my sharp intake of breath. I knelt down next to my daughter and took her hand. Baby, that's not true. Mommy loves you more than anything in the whole world. I would never leave you. Never. Then why do I live here and not with you? Lily asked. And the innocence in her question broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. Before I could answer, my mother spoke up from the stove. Because your mother can't take care of you properly. Sweetheart, she doesn't have a nice house like we do. She doesn't have the things you need. Grandma and Grandpa will always take care of you. Won't we? My father finally looked up. That's right. We're the only family you can count on. Lily, your mother comes and goes, but we're always here. You're lying to her, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You're poisoning her against me. We're telling her the truth, my mother said coldly. You gave up your rights to her the moment you proved you couldn't be a proper mother. We're just helping her understand reality. I never gave up my rights, I said. You manipulated me into living here. And then you slowly took over. This is kidnapping. This is abuse. My father stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Watch your mouth in front of the child. And if you're going to make wild accusations, maybe you shouldn't be allowed here at all. I looked at Lily, at her frightened face, and made myself calm down. I kissed her forehead and told her I loved her. Then I left. The recorder still running. That night, I met with David Miller at a coffee shop downtown. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a reputation for taking on impossible cases. I played him the recordings. I showed him the photographs of my bruises. I told him everything. He listened carefully, making notes. When I finished, He looked at me seriously. Ellie, what your parents are doing is called parental alienation, and it's a form of emotional abuse. Combined with the physical abuse against you, we have grounds for a case. But I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Your parents will fight back. They'll try to destroy your credibility. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Lily's face when she asked me why I didn't live with her. I thought about 5 years of being told I was worthless. I thought about my father's boot in my ribs. I'm prepared. I said, good, because we're going to need one more thing. We need testimony from Lily herself, done through a child psychologist in a safe environment, and we need to coordinate with law enforcement. What your father did to you is assault. I want you to file a police report. He'll deny it. Let him. We have your medical records from the emergency room visit you made the next day. We have photographs. We have a pattern of behavior. Ellie, you're not powerless anymore. You're building a case. 2 days later, I walked into the police station and filed a report against my father for assault. The officer who took my statement was a woman named Detective Sarah Ramirez. She looked at my photographs, listened to my recordings, and told me something I'll never forget. I've seen cases like this before, she said. Parents who think they own their children, even when those children are adults. They justify abuse as discipline, control as love. But the law doesn't see it that way. We're going to investigate this. A week later, Detective Ramirez and a social worker named Marcus Chen showed up at my parents' house unannounced. I wasn't there. I was at work, washing dishes and trying not to think about what was happening. But Detective Ramirez called me afterward and told me what had transpired. My parents had been shocked at first, then angry. They had denied everything, claimed I was mentally unstable, making things up for attention. But when Detective Ramirez played the recordings, when she showed them the photographs, when Marcus Chen explained that he would need to interview Lily separately, their confidence had cracked. Your mother tried to claim the recordings were illegal. Detective Ramirez told me. I informed her that in this state, only one party needs to consent to a recording. That party was you. Your father became aggressive, tried to intimidate us. That didn't go well for him. What happens now? I asked. Now we build a criminal case for assault, and a separate case with Child Protective Services regarding Lily's welfare. Marcus will arrange for a child psychologist to interview Lily. And Ellie, you need to find somewhere safe to stay. When your parents find out what's happening, they might retaliate. I called Mrs. Hayes, and she offered me her spare bedroom. I moved what few possessions I had that same day. That night, I lay in a stranger's guest room and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next 2 weeks were a blur of lawyer meetings, police interviews, and court filings. David Miller worked with Detective Ramirez to coordinate everything. Marcus Chen conducted a forensic interview with Lily, and the psychologist's report was damning. Lily had described being told repeatedly that I didn't love her, that I was broken, that she needed to call my parents mommy and daddy instead of grandma and grandpa. She had described seeing my father hurt me, and being scared that he would hurt her too. My parents hired Thomas Blackwell, one of the most expensive lawyers in the state. They were preparing to fight with everything they had. But what they didn't know was that I was done being afraid of them. 3 weeks after I filed the police report, I went back to my parents' house one last time. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had a court order allowing me supervised visitation with Lily. The supervisor was Marcus Chen, and he stood outside in his car while I went to the door. My mother answered. Her face was tight with fury. You've caused quite a circus, she said coldly. All these authorities crawling around, asking questions, treating us like criminals. You should be ashamed of yourself. Can I see my daughter? I asked calmly. She's busy. The court says I get 2 hours. Are you going to violate a court order? My mother's jaw clenched, but she stepped aside. I walked into the house, and there was Lily, sitting on the couch, looking small and scared. My father was in his armchair, glaring at me with pure hatred. Hello, Lily, I said softly. Hi, Mommy, she whispered. I sat down next to her and pulled out a coloring book I had brought. We colored together in silence for a few minutes while my parents watched like hawks. Then Lily did something that changed everything. She accidentally knocked over a glass of juice that had been sitting on the coffee table. The orange liquid splashed onto the carpet and onto a small throw pillow that had belonged to Mia. My mother's reaction was instantaneous. She lunged forward and grabbed Lily by the hair, yanking her off the couch. Lily screamed in pain. "You stupid, clumsy little brat," my mother shrieked. "That was Mia's pillow. You ruin everything. Just like your mother." I didn't think. I moved on pure instinct. I threw myself between my mother and Lily, pushing my daughter behind me. My mother's hand, still raised to slap, froze in midair. "You will never touch her again," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Never." My father rose from his chair, his face red with rage. The smell of beer was heavy on his breath even though it was only 3 p.m. "You think you can come into my house and threaten your mother?" "This isn't a threat," I said. "It's a promise. You've hurt me for the last time. You've manipulated my daughter for the last time. You wanted to teach me a lesson. Well, I learned it. I learned that you're both bullies who only feel powerful when you're hurting someone weaker. But I'm not weak anymore." "You're nothing," my father said, stepping closer. "You're trash. You always have been. You'll never have the life Mia has. You'll never be successful, never be respected, and you'll never get custody of that kid." I smiled then. It was the same cold smile I had given him the night he kicked me. "You're wrong. About all of it. But especially about the custody part, because in about 2 minutes, you're both going to understand what happens when you push someone too far." "What the hell are you talking about?" my mother demanded. I pulled out my phone and sent a text message. 30 seconds later, there was a knock on the door. My father moved to answer it, but I held up my hand. "Let me," I said. I opened the door. Detective Ramirez stood there with another officer. Behind them was Marcus Chen and a woman from Child Protective Services, and behind all of them was David Miller, holding a folder full of documents. "Robert and Patricia Vance," Detective Ramirez said, stepping into the house. "We have a warrant for your arrest for assault and battery, child endangerment, and parental alienation. You have the right to remain silent." The look on my father's face was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Complete the shock, then disbelief, then, finally, and fear. Real fear. "This is ridiculous," my mother said. "But," her voice shook, "you can't arrest us. We haven't done anything wrong. We're respected members of this community. Ma'am, we have multiple recordings of you and your husband emotionally abusing your daughter and granddaughter. We have photographic evidence of physical assault. We have testimony from a licensed child psychologist. And as of 1 hour ago, we have video evidence of you assaulting a minor." Marcus Chen held up his phone. He had filmed the entire incident with Lily through the living room window. My mother's face went white. My father tried to argue, to bluster, to threaten legal action. But the officers moved forward with handcuffs. And suddenly, the great Robert Vance, the man who had built an empire and ruled his family with an iron fist, was standing in his own living room with his hands behind his back, being read his rights. I knelt down and took Lily into my arms. She was shaking, crying. I held her tight and whispered into her hair, "It's okay, baby. It's going to be okay now. Mommy's got you." As the police led my parents out of the house, my father turned to look at me one last time. "You'll regret this," he said. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." After my parents were arrested, Lily and I were taken to a temporary safe house while the legal proceedings began. The next few weeks were a nightmare of court dates, psychological evaluations, and constant worry that somehow my parents would find a way to win. They had money. They had connections. They had Thomas Blackwell, who fought dirty and tried to paint me as an unfit mother with mental health issues. But we had the truth. And the truth was overwhelming. The recordings were played in court. Every cruel word. Every manipulation. Every threat. The photographs of my bruises were entered into evidence. Marcus Chen's video of my mother grabbing Lily's hair was shown to the judge. And most damning of all, Lily's testimony, delivered through the child psychologist in a closed hearing, described years of being told her mother didn't love her, of seeing her grandfather hurt me, of being afraid. I'll never forget the moment when my father took the stand and David Miller asked him directly, Mr. Vance, did you kick your daughter in the ribs? My father, who had lied his entire life, who had built his reputation on being respectable and upstanding, looked the judge straight in the eye and said, yes, I was teaching her a lesson. Sometimes pain is the only thing that gets through. The courtroom went silent. Even Thomas Blackwell looked horrified. David Miller let the statement hang in the air for a long moment before saying quietly, no further questions. Your Honor, when my mother took the stand, David asked her why she had told Lily that I didn't love her. My mother's response was chilling in its honesty, because she doesn't know how to love properly. She needed to be corrected. The child needed proper guidance. Proper guidance, David repeated. Is that what you call grabbing a 5-year-old by the hair? She spilled juice on something precious. She needed to learn consequences. The consequence being physical pain inflicted by an adult on a child. My mother's composure finally cracked. That girl was becoming spoiled. Just like her mother. We were trying to fix them both. The judge, a woman in her 60s, named Judge Martha Callahan, had heard enough. She called a recess and returned 20 minutes later with her decision. I have been a family court judge for 23 years, Judge Callahan said, her voice firm and clear. I have seen many difficult cases, many complicated family dynamics, but I have rarely seen such a clear case of systematic abuse and manipulation as I have seen here today. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, you have demonstrated through your own words and actions that you are unfit to have custody or even unsupervised visitation with your granddaughter. Your parental rights as guardians are hereby terminated. Full custody is awarded to Ellie Vance, with no contact between the child and grandparents until such time as the child requests it and a psychologist deems it appropriate, which I suspect will be never. She paused, looking directly at my parents. Additionally, I am recommending that the district attorney pursue criminal charges for child endangerment and assault. This court is adjourned. I sat in that courtroom and felt tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of relief so profound it felt like I could finally breathe again. David Miller put his hand on my shoulder and said, You did it. You got your daughter back. But the legal victory was just the beginning. My parents were convicted of assault and child endangerment. My father received a 6-month jail sentence and 2 years probation. My mother received probation and was ordered to attend anger management classes, but the real punishment came from their community. I didn't plan it. Exactly. But I did write an anonymous article for the local newspaper about a prominent couple who had abused their adult daughter and young granddaughter. I didn't use names, but I provided enough details that anyone who knew the Vance family could connect the dots. The story went viral in our town. Within a week, my father's business partners started canceling contracts. Their country club membership was revoked. Friends stopped returning calls. The respectable, upstanding Robert and Patricia Vance became pariahs in the community they had worked so hard to impress. 3 months after the trial, my father called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Ellie, he said, and his voice sounded old, defeated. Your mother hasn't left her bedroom in 2 weeks. She won't eat. She just sits there, staring at the wall. She asked me something this morning. She asked if Lily would ever forgive her. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Nothing. She shouldn't ask about forgiveness, I said calmly. She should ask what it feels like. To lose everything. To have people look at you with disgust. To realize that all the power you thought you had was just an illusion. That's what you should both be thinking about. Dad. Not forgiveness. Understanding. I hung up before he could respond. 6 months after the trial, Lily and I moved into a small house on Chestnut Street. It wasn't much. Just 2 bedrooms and a tiny backyard. But it was ours. I had gotten a better job, working at a flower shop called Bloom and Grow. The owner, a kind woman named Susan, had hired me despite my lack of experience because, as she said, anyone who fights that hard for their kid deserves a second chance. Mike from the diner still came around sometimes, helping me fix things in the house, playing with Lily in the backyard. Something was developing between us. Slowly and carefully. He never pushed. never demanded. He just showed up, consistently and kindly. One Saturday afternoon in late spring, we took Lily to the park. She ran ahead of us, her laughter ringing out as she climbed on the jungle gym. Mike and I sat on a bench, watching her play. "She's happy," Mike observed. "Yeah," I said. "She is. We both are." Lily came running over a few minutes later, holding a dandelion she had picked from the grass. "Mommy, this is for you." She thrust the yellow flower into my hand with the enthusiasm only a child can muster. I took it like it was made of gold. "Baby, this is the most beautiful flower I've ever seen." Lily beamed at me, then ran back to the jungle gym. I looked down at the dandelion in my hand, this weed that most people would dismiss, and I understood something profound. My parents had spent their lives destroying things to feel powerful, building their reputation on tearing me down, controlling Lily to prove they had authority. But I had built something real, something that couldn't be taken away. I had built a life where my daughter felt safe enough to pick flowers and give them to me, where I could sit in the sun and not feel afraid, where love wasn't something you had to earn through perfection, but something you gave freely and received the same way. That evening, we went back to our little house on Chestnut Street. Lily helped me make dinner, standing on a stool to stir the pasta. After we ate, she drew a picture at the kitchen table while Mike and I cleaned up. When she finished, she held it up proudly. It was a house, drawn in crayon, a small house with a red door, and 3 stick figures standing in front holding hands. Me, and her, and what I assumed was Mike, though she didn't label it. "Is this our house?" I asked. "Yes," Lily said. "It's where we're happy." I hung that picture on the refrigerator with a magnet, and every time I looked at it over the following weeks, I felt something I never thought I would feel: peace. My parents lost everything they valued: their reputation, their standing in the community, their sense of control. I heard through Mrs. Hayes that they had sold their house in Riverside Heights and moved to a small condo on the other side of town. Robert's business had collapsed entirely. Patricia was seeing a therapist, though I doubted it would change anything fundamental about who she was. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I simply moved forward with my life, building something they could never understand. A home based on love, not fear. A family based on respect, not dominance. One night, a full year after the trial, Lily and I were sitting on the porch of our house, watching the fireflies come out as the sun set. She leaned against me, and I wrapped my arm around her small shoulders. "Mommy," she said quietly. "Yes." "Baby, do you think Grandma and Grandpa miss me?" I thought carefully about how to answer. Lily was only 6 now, still too young to understand the full complexity of what had happened. But she deserved honesty. Age-appropriate honesty. "I think they probably do miss you, in their own way," I said. "But sometimes people don't know how to love correctly. They think loving someone means controlling them, or changing them. Real love means accepting someone as they are and helping them be happy." "Like how you love me?" Lily asked. "Exactly like how I love you." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm glad I live with you." "Mommy." "Me too. Sweetie." "Me too." As the stars came out and Lily eventually fell asleep against my shoulder, I thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the fear, the fight, the victory. People always say that the best revenge is living well, and I used to think that was just a platitude. But sitting there on my porch, holding my daughter, I realized it was the truest thing I'd ever heard. My parents had tried to break me. They had tried to take everything that mattered. But in the end, all they had done was show me what I was capable of. I was capable of standing up, of fighting back, of building a life from the ashes of their cruelty. They had given me fire, intending to burn me. Instead, I had taken that fire and forged myself into something stronger than they could ever imagine. From their ashes, I had grown roses. So here's what I want you to understand. If you're in a situation where someone is making you feel worthless, where family is supposed to love you but instead tears you down, where you're afraid to stand up because you think you'll lose everything, remember this: you're stronger than you know. And losing people who hurt you isn't losing at all. It's winning. My question for you is this: What would you do if you had to choose between family and freedom? Would you have the courage to walk away from people who share your blood but poison your soul? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped or powerless, or like you didn't deserve happiness, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to stay victims. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the best thing we can do for each other is remind ourselves that we're not alone, and that freedom is always worth fighting for. The truth is, 2 years have passed since that courtroom victory, and life hasn't been perfect. There are still hard days. Lily still has nightmares sometimes. Waking up, crying about the old house, about angry voices. On those nights, I hold her and rock her and remind her that she's safe now, that no one will hurt her ever again. I started therapy 6 months after the trial. My therapist, Dr. Sarahchen, helped me understand something crucial about the cycle I had been trapped in. She explained that children who grow up with conditional love often spend their whole lives trying to earn approval that will never come. That I had been programmed from childhood to believe I was the problem. That if I could just be better, be perfect, my parents would finally love me the way I needed. But Ellie, Dr. Chen said during one of our sessions, what if the problem was never you? What if the problem was that your parents were incapable of healthy love? That realization hit me like a freight train. For 32 years, I had carried the weight of my parents' dysfunction on my shoulders, believing it was my burden to bear. But it wasn't. It had never been. In therapy, I learned about narcissistic parents, about golden children and scapegoats. My sister Mia had been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, until she got tired of the pedestal and escaped to California. Then I became the only target left. Lily was meant to be their second chance, a child they could mold into perfection. When I tried to interfere with that plan, I became the enemy. Understanding the psychology didn't make the pain go away, but it helped me stop blaming myself. It helped me see that no amount of perfection would have ever been enough. The game was rigged from the start. Mike and I got married on a Saturday afternoon in October. In the backyard of our house on Chestnut Street, it was small and simple. Mrs. Hayes was there, wearing a lavender dress and crying happy tears. David Miller came, bringing his wife and their twin daughters. Detective Ramirez showed up in a beautiful navy suit, telling me she wouldn't have missed it for the world. Susan from the flower shop arranged all the flowers herself, saying it was her gift to us, and Lily was my flower girl, wearing a white dress with pink flowers embroidered on the hem. She took her job very seriously, walking down our makeshift aisle, scattering rose petals with intense concentration. When she reached the front, she looked up at me and Mike and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Now you're going to be my real daddy." Right. Mike knelt down to her level and said I would be honored to be your daddy. "If that's what you want." "I want it," Lily said firmly. And then she hugged him so tight. I saw tears in Mike's eyes. We never sent an invitation to my parents. I didn't want them there. This day was about building something new, not rehashing the past, but apparently word reached them anyway because the day before the wedding, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Ellie." My mother's voice was different than I remembered. Smaller. Tired. "I heard you're getting married tomorrow." "Yes," I said simply. There was a long pause. "Then I suppose we're not invited." "No. You're not." Another pause. "I wanted to tell you something. Your father and we've been in counseling. The therapist says we have issues with control and emotional regulation. She says, we hurt you badly." I waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. I don't know if I can ever truly understand what we did wrong. My mother continued. "In my mind, we were just trying to help, to guide you, to make sure Lily had a stable home. By destroying mine," I asked quietly, "I see now that's what it looked like to you. But Ellie, you have to understand. We did what we thought was right." And there it was. The reason I could never have a relationship with my parents, even after everything, after the trial, after the therapy, they still couldn't truly take responsibility. It was always what we thought was right, or how it looked to you, but never we were wrong. And we hurt you. And we're sorry. Mom, I said, and I used that word deliberately, even though it tasted bitter in my mouth. I hope therapy helps you. I really do. But I need you to understand something. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not carrying hatred around. I've moved on. I have a life that's full of love and peace and joy. Lily is thriving. I'm thriving. And none of that includes you or Dad. Not because I'm punishing you, but because you're toxic to us. Your presence in our lives only brings pain. So that's it, my mother asked. And now I could hear tears in her voice. You're cutting us off forever. We'll never see our granddaughter again. That will be Lily's choice when she's old enough to make it. I said, if she ever wants a relationship with you, I won't stop her. But I won't force it either. You had your chance. You had years of chances. And you used every single one to hurt us. I'm your mother, she said. And now she was crying openly. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you gave birth to me, I said. But it doesn't mean you get unlimited access to hurt me. Being a parent is a privilege, not a right. You lost that privilege. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up before she could respond. And then I sat down on my couch and cried, not because I regretted what I had said, but because even after everything, part of me still wished I had parents who could love me the way I needed. Part of me still grieved for the relationship that never was and never would be. But the next day, when I walked down the aisle toward Mike with Lily dancing ahead of me, I wasn't thinking about my parents. I was thinking about how I had survived, how I had protected my daughter, how I had built a family from scratch with people who chose to love me. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. After the wedding, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mike adopted Lily legally. She started calling him Dad within a month, and it felt natural. Right. She was excelling in first grade, making friends, sleeping through the night, most of the time. The nightmares became less frequent. I continued working at the flower shop, and Susan eventually made me manager. I loved the work, the creativity, the way flowers could communicate emotions that words couldn't. Every arrangement I made felt like a small act of defiance against my parents' belief that I was worthless and incapable. One day, about a year after the wedding, a woman came into the shop. She was in her 40s, well-dressed, and she looked vaguely familiar. She browsed for a few minutes before approaching the counter, where I was working on an anniversary bouquet. Are you Ellie? She asked. Yes. Can I help you? She extended her hand. I'm Jennifer Morrison. I read your story in the paper a few years ago. The anonymous one about parental abuse. I knew it was about the Vances. Robert built an addition on my house years ago. I shook her hand cautiously, unsure where this was going. I wanted to tell you something. Jennifer continued. After your story came out, I started thinking about my own family. My mother was similar to yours. Not as extreme. But the manipulation was there. The constant criticism. The way she pit my siblings and me against each other. Reading your story gave me the courage to go to therapy. To set boundaries. To stop letting her control my life. So thank you. She bought a small bouquet of sunflowers and left, but her words stayed with me for days. I had never considered that my story might help someone else. I had written it partly for revenge, partly for closure, but maybe it had served a greater purpose. That week, I started writing more. Not for publication, just for myself. I wrote about my childhood, about the subtle ways my parents had undermined my confidence from an early age. I wrote about the years with Lily's father, and how I had chosen him precisely because his neglect felt familiar, almost comfortable. I wrote about the slow process of healing, of learning to love myself, of understanding that my worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. Dr. Chen encouraged this writing. She said it was a way of taking back my narrative, and of refusing to let my parents' version of events be the only one that existed. 2 years after the wedding, I published a short essay in an online magazine about surviving parental narcissism. I used my real name this time. Within days, it had thousands of shares. My inbox filled with messages from people telling me their own stories, thanking me for putting words to their experiences. My parents saw the article. I know because my father sent me one final email. No subject line. Just a message that said, "You've made your point. You've destroyed us publicly. I hope you're happy." I wrote back, I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to heal myself. There's a difference. He never responded, and I never heard from them again. But other people did reach out. Old acquaintances from high school who told me they remembered my parents being cold and demanding. A former coworker of my father's who said he always knew something was off about how Robert talked about his family. Even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to say that the whole extended family had known my parents were difficult, but no one had ever challenged them. They were like royalty in the family. My cousin Maria told me over coffee. Nobody wanted to cross them. But Ellie, I'm so sorry we didn't stand up for you. We should have. I appreciated the apology. But I also recognized that expecting other people to save me would have been just another form of helplessness. The truth was, I had to save myself. No one else could have done it for me. On Lily's 8th birthday, we threw a party at our house. She invited 12 kids from school, and our small backyard was full of laughter, birthday cake, and children playing tag. Mike was manning the grill, making hot dogs and hamburgers. Mrs. Hayes sat in a lawn chair, watching the chaos with a contented smile. Susan brought elaborate flower crown she had made for Lily, who wore it like she was a princess. At one point, I stood on the back porch just watching it all. This life I had built, this family I had chosen, this happiness I had fought for with everything I had. Lily ran up to me, breathless and grinning. "Mommy, this is the best birthday ever." I hugged her tight. "I'm so glad." "Baby, do you know what I wished for when I blew out my candles?" she asked. "You're not supposed to tell, or it won't come true." I reminded her, "But it already came true," she said. "I wish that every day could feel like this. Safe and fun and full of people who love me. And it does feel like that now. Every day." I had to turn away because I was crying. Happy tears. But still. Lily noticed and hugged me tighter. "It's okay." "Mommy, you cry when you're happy now. That's different than before." She was right. She was so perceptive. My beautiful, intelligent daughter. She remembered a time when I only cried from sadness and fear. Now I cried at weddings, at her school performances, at beautiful sunsets. I cried because I had the capacity to feel joy so intense it overflowed. That night, after all the guests had gone home and Lily was asleep, Mike and I sat on the porch again. The same porch where Lily and I had watched fireflies years ago, where I had first understood what real peace felt like. "You know what I realized today?" I said to Mike. "What's that?" "My parents spent so much energy trying to make me feel small, trying to convince me I was worthless, that I couldn't survive without them, that I was a failure. And the biggest revenge, the sweetest victory, isn't that they lost everything. It's that I proved them wrong. I survived. I thrived. I built something beautiful." Mike took my hand. "You did more than survive. Ellie, you transformed. You took all that pain and turned it into strength. You broke a cycle that probably went back generations. Lily will never know what it's like to question whether her mother loves her. She'll never have to earn your approval. You gave her a gift your parents couldn't give you." He was right. And maybe that was the real story. Not the dramatic courtroom scenes, or the arrests, or the public downfall of Robert and Patricia Vance. The real story was quieter than that. It was in the daily moments of choosing love over fear, of choosing healing over bitterness, of choosing to be the mother my daughter needed, instead of the daughter my parents wanted. 3 years after that conversation, when Lily was 11, she asked me about my parents for the first time in years. "Mom," she said one evening while we were making dinner together, "do you ever miss Grandma and Grandpa?" I thought carefully about my answer. Sometimes I miss the idea of having parents who could love me well, but I don't miss the reality of what they were. Does that make sense? "Yeah," Lily said. She was chopping vegetables for the salad. Her knife skills impressive for her age. "I don't really remember them much anymore. Just feelings. Like being scared and confused." "I'm sorry you have those memories," I said. "It's okay. I have better ones now. Like making dinner with you. And Dad teaching me to ride my bike. And Mrs. Hayes teaching me to play chess." She paused, then added, "The therapist says it's okay to be glad they're not in my life anymore. She says choosing who gets to be in your life is an act of self-love." My daughter, at 11 years old, understood concepts it had taken me 3 decades to grasp. That was how cycles broke. That was how healing passed from one generation to the next. Your therapist is a smart woman, I said. She also says you're really brave. She says not every parent would do what you did. Fight that hard. She says some people stay in bad situations because it's easier than changing. I stopped stirring the pasta and looked at my daughter. Do you think I'm brave? Lily looked at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Mom, you're the bravest person I know. You saved us both. That night, after Lily went to bed, I pulled out the journal I had been keeping for years. I wrote about the conversation, about how my daughter saw me, and I wrote something I had never quite articulated before. I forgave myself for staying too long, for not seeing the signs earlier, for the moments when I had been weak, when I had let my parents hurt me, when I had doubted myself. I forgave myself for all of it because I understood now that I had been doing the best I could with the tools I had. And when I got better tools, when I learned healthier ways of being, I had used them. That was all anyone could do. The journal entry ended with a line I would come back to over and over in the years that followed, from ashes to roses, from victim to survivor to thriver. This is my story, and I get to write the ending. 5 years after the trial, I got a call from Detective Ramirez. She was retiring and wanted to have coffee. We met at a small cafe downtown, and she told me she had followed my journey over the years, reading my essays, seeing my posts about the flower shop, watching me build a life. You know what strikes me most about your story, she said. It's not the dramatic rescue or the court case. It's what you did after. A lot of people would have stayed angry. I would have let that rage define them. But you chose something different. I chose happiness. I said simply, I chose to build instead of destroy. That's rare, Detective Ramirez said, and important. Because victims of abuse often struggle with that transition. They get stuck in victimhood, or they swing too far the other way and become hard and bitter. But you found balance. You set boundaries without becoming cruel. You protected yourself and Lily without becoming paranoid. That takes real strength. After we said goodbye, I walked through downtown, past the courthouse where my life had changed, past the old diner where I used to work, past the fancy neighborhood where my parents used to live. They had moved away entirely. I had heard. To another state where nobody knew their history, I didn't feel triumphant walking past their old house. I didn't feel vindicated or gleeful. I felt something quieter and more profound. I felt free. That freedom had cost me everything I thought I was supposed to want. The approval of my parents, a relationship with my extended family, most of whom had sided with Robert and Patricia. The fantasy that someday, somehow, my parents would see me and truly love me. But in exchange, I had gained something infinitely more valuable. I had gained myself, my authentic self, not the beaten down, people-pleasing version I had been performing for 3 decades. I had gained the ability to look in the mirror, and like the person I saw, I had gained a daughter who felt safe and loved. I had gained a husband who chose me every day. I had gained a community of people who valued me. The trade was worth it. 1,000 times worth it. Now, as I'm writing this final part of my story, Lily is 13. She's in 7th grade, playing soccer, learning guitar, and navigating the complicated social world of middle school. She's confident in ways I never was at her age. She speaks up when something bothers her. She sets boundaries with friends who don't treat her well. She knows, deep in her bones, that she deserves respect and kindness. That knowledge is my legacy to her. Not money or status or a perfect life free from problems, but the unshakable certainty that she is valuable, that she is loved, and that she never has to accept mistreatment from anyone. Mike and I are talking about having another baby. The idea terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. Can I do it again? Can I raise another child? Better this time. From the beginning. Without the trauma. Without the interference. Doctor, Chen says that fear is normal. She also says that the fact I'm even considering it shows how far I've come. The Ellie who lived in her parents' house, who let herself be kicked and demeaned. I would never have had the confidence to imagine bringing another life into this world. But I'm not that Ellie anymore. I haven't been for a long time. So here's the truth. The final truth I want you to understand. Healing isn't linear. There are still days when I doubt myself, when I wonder if I did the right thing, when I feel guilty for destroying my parents' lives, even though I know intellectually that they destroyed their own lives. But those days are fewer and farther between. And when they come, I have tools now. I have therapy. I have Mike. I have friends who remind me of my strength. I have Lily, whose very existence proves that I made the right choice. And I have my roses. Literally. In my backyard. I planted a rose garden. Every spring, they bloom in vibrant reds and pinks and yellows. They're beautiful and strong, and sometimes they have thorns that draw blood if you're not careful. They grew from soil. I mixed myself. From the ashes of the life I used to have. And they're a daily reminder that from destruction can come creation, from pain can come beauty, from ashes can come roses. That's my story. That's my truth. And if you're reading this, if you're in a situation that feels impossible, if you're being hurt by people who claim to love you, I want you to remember something. You are not trapped. You are not powerless. You are not worthless. No matter how many times someone has told you that you are, you have options. You have strength you haven't even discovered yet. And you deserve a life that feels safe and joyful and full of love. It won't be easy. God knows my journey wasn't easy. But it was worth it. Every tear. Every court date. Every moment of fear was worth it for the life I have now. So my final question for you is this: what would your life look like if you chose yourself? If you set boundaries, walked away from toxicity, and built something new? What roses could you grow from your ashes? Think about it. And when you're ready, make your choice. If this story helped you, if it gave you hope or courage or just made you feel less alone, please like this post. Subscribe for more stories about survival and transformation. And comment below. Tell me your story. Or tell me what resonated. Or just tell me you're fighting your own battle. I see you. I believe in you. And I'm rooting for you. Because we all deserve to bloom.